Hi, my dear Astro family. Today we are going to be looking at Neptune stationing direct on 29 degree of Pisces. So more and more planets are out of the woods. Obviously, Saturn went direct a few weeks ago. Mercury went direct recently. Now Neptune is joining the club. So pretty much we only have got Jupiter and Uranus being retrograde right now. Of course, Chiron is retrograde as well, but I'm talking about the original planets. So, we are going to be exploring what it might mean because this is the very last time ever Neptune is stationing direct in the sign of Pisces, of course, in our lifetime. So, this is not going to be happening for another 160 years or so. Now, what we will discover or discuss in this video is because while Neptune is going direct, this is going to be happening in a fixed star called Shiat. So we're going to be looking at that. Mercury in shadow period still, but in the at the end at the very last tail of Taurus, and it's making a trine to Neptune, while of course it's opposing Uranus. And on top of that, Neptune is sitting on an indirect midpoint of Uranus and Pluto. Mars is squaring Neptune, of course. Mars is on the galactic center. So we are going to be exploring these planetary energies. Shortly, I'm going to be sharing the screen as well so that you can follow what I'm actually talking about. But I would like to invite you for a charity webinar that is going to be happening on the 27th of December. This is going to be a presentation about what I have discovered in regards to opposition. So most likely this is going to be a piece of information that you haven't heard before, and I would like you to join. You can choose the amount of donation that you would like to give towards this cause. It's going to be the Save the Children charity, actually. I've been supporting charities for the last 10 years, not always through astrology, but some private initiations and so forth. I'm passionate about that on one hand because I'm never going to have a child, I believe. And secondly, I remember how Christmas periods were for me, and it wasn't always the bestest times ever. So I would like to help those kids to have a better Christmas. But let's talk about the upcoming charts. I'm just going to switch off the camera so that you can focus on the chart. And Neptune is stationing direct on the 10th of December. So, like I said, Neptune is right there on 29 degree of Pisces. And then we can see that it receives a square from Mars, which is out of bound. On top of that, Mercury is opposing Uranus, and Mercury is in a trine to Neptune as well. And like I said, Neptune is sitting on a Uranus-Pluto indirect or a direct midpoint. So basically, if we looked at the distance between Pluto and Uranus and divided by 2, then it would be somewhere around 29 degree of Pisces. So that's what I'm going to be discovering for you. There is no major asteroids, or there is no asteroids involved here in this chart. So therefore, we are just going to be really focusing on these major planetary energies. So Neptune going the stationary direct, I mean, on one hand, I think this is a very major movement because it's going to be asking us to go through an emotional and spiritual alignment. You know, Neptune has been in the sign of Pisces since 2011. So it might have brought certain type of long-standing confusions around what we want, what our visions are. And most likely that long-standing confusion begins to clear up a little bit. You know, yes, maybe there are some erratic impulses and deep intuitive focus on your hidden truth as well. It can feel like that this is my last chance basically to figure out what exactly I want to do. You know, Neptune is the planet of dreams, illusions, spirituality, dissolving boundaries. So when it stations direct, it means that it's actually ending its retrograde period. The fog starts to lift, and that's why it comes with the clarity. Saturn is right next to it as well. Of course, it's trying to ground us a little bit more, But still, Neptune going direct, it would talk to you about, like, I'm going to start understanding my intuitions. You might even feel more anchored, for example, when it comes to your emotional and spiritual life. Neptune, often what we do is that we feel kind of like we are drifting apart. We are just drifting. We are not even present. And that might start dissipating. This might even help you to dissolve some of these illusions as well, and Saturn is helpful there because what it does is try to discern reality from illusions. So that's even adding to the picture that we're going to start seeing things clearer. Illusions we have held onto, or parts of our life that were potentially vague or deceitful, can now be seen with more honesty. It's about self-understanding. It's about being able to let go of unhealthy attachments. And even it can indicate that our creative energy or our spiritual insights are going to be restored, or it's going to become a little bit steadier. Yes, we do have got out of bound Mars right on the galactic center, squaring Neptune. Well, Mars is going to make the exact conjunction to the galactic center on the 11th of December, so it's right next to it. And a square is a 90-degree aspect, which can bring certain type of challenges. Of course, we have got the planet of action and drive, somehow clashing with the planet of ideas and that fog that I have been talking about. And Mars is standing on that galactic center. A galactic center is kind of like a big black hole which is sucking the energy in. We are kind of like drawn towards that. It's kind of like being drawn towards the unknown. We are not sure what is there, but it's so intriguing. I'm curious about it. I want to explore it more. And of course, this out of bound Mars might not know the limits, right? And it's squaring Saturn as well. So Saturn is telling Mars, be careful, because you might get sucked into that black hole. You might get sucked into a situation which is you're going to have to be able to pay the consequences of that. But Mars being out of bound, it might feel invincible. It is like, I don't care, I'm going towards that. Very interesting, inviting. It's kind of like the sirens, right? When they were singing to the men on the boats and stuff like that, and then they couldn't resist. So that's kind of like the galactic center when I cannot resist something and then I have to go towards that with Mars. Now, the involvement of the galactic center, which is also, some astrologers are going to claim that this is a very karmic, a truth revealing point in the sky. It might suggest that this confusion or conflict, it might be connected to collective ideas or spiritual beliefs or even to your higher purpose. That Mars is super inspired to reach a vision, and that's Neptune. And Saturn says, you know what? If it seems to be realistic, so let's go for it, but let's go step by step. Or Saturn is going to say that I don't think it's realistic enough. So we're going to have to readjust our plans. Of course, Pisces is also connected to endings as well. So Mars might want to be together with Saturn, cutting out all the illusions that we have created, for example, in the last 14 years, and then to start fresh. And maybe that Mars is super motivated now to cross actually, or to kind of create boundaries. Yes, this could indicate, though, in a negative way, certain type of misunderstandings or the lack of personal boundaries or being deceived by others, or we are deceiving, of course, people in our lives as well. So the challenge is to align our will and actions with our deepest values and integrities. Now, Mercury is actually in trine to that Neptune as well. A trine is an 120-degree aspect and it's meant to be flowing harmoniously. Now, Mercury is about the mind, the communication, comes together with Neptune, which is intuition and spirituality. So it looks like that Mercury has been doing a lot of research to be able to figure out, the meaning to life, for example, or it has been trying to discover certain type of secrets. And because it's an opposition to Uranus, which is kind of like the very final opposition we had two before. So this is the very final piece of that puzzle. It's a final piece of information that is going to be super shocking. But Neptune, what it does is that it's trying to make you understand why certain things happened in your life. Mercury and Neptune together could really talk to you about intuitive insights, deepening your intuition, even psychic downloads as well. Or it can even make you a lot more creative as well. Here the mind and the spirit are aligned. So making it easier to receive messages. And these messages might be very, or it can feel a very fated or profoundly truth as well. And, with Mercury being still in the sign of Scorpio, something that is hidden, submerged, it's a taboo topic there. So the trine could actually help to dissolve the mental blocks and even allow you for certain type of raw honesty or kind of like understanding the secret of life, understanding certain type of taboo topics. This is also the third trine that is happening between Mercury and Neptune. So this is also about completion as well. So we had this kind of like this multi-stage processing of certain type of emotions and information or truth or realization, of course, over the last couple of months. So this is going to become the final integration of that, the understanding of that. Remember, Mercury is still in shadow period until it reaches 6 degree of Sagittarius. So it means that the lessons are still not learned fully yet, but we are gaining more and more insights. They are more and more profound, and we are still revising something. We are still integrating something. And it feels like that we are still doing certain type of careful introspections. But this is where Uranus could become a challenge, right? Because Uranus is opposing that, and Uranus is electrifying the mind. Even it can be kind of like uplifting the mind or making it a lot more restless, even nervous as well. Like I said, Mars is squaring Neptune, right? So, as well as Saturn, which I made a separate video about. So, I don't wish to kind of like repeat myself that much. But Mars is out of bound, which means that it exceeds the sun's maximum declination. So, it basically operates outside the usual rules and the boundaries as well. So, therefore, it's an extreme unconventional action that we want to take. And therefore, this mask can become a lot more erratic, unpredictable. It kind of feels like powerful, invincible. It's kind of like a wild card, really. It doesn't care about any kind of restrictions or structures or convention because it has got a moral code, it has got a belief system, it has got the confidence. And of course, Saturn is trying to kind of dim that down a little bit, and Neptune is potentially making Mars a little bit more confused. So this could come, for example, with certain type of regrets as well, right? I have committed to something, and then after I'm not too sure. I have got certain type of doubts whether I took the right course of action. But we just need to be very mindful with that Mars because it's very reckless, it's very pioneering as well. It is all about extreme achievements. And of course, we might be making certain type of mistakes. But the ultimate goal here of Mars, it feels like that it wants to lift the spiritual blocks, the spiritual fog, basically, so that you can have a clear sense of self and intuition. Simultaneously, your drive and actions are amplified, of course, due to the out of bound energy. I usually call Mars and Neptune as kind of like the spiritual warrior all together. So it's a little bit of a crusade, especially when Mars is in the sign of Sagittarius, because it thinks that I'm going to be saving the world, and I can do that alone. And potentially, maybe we're gonna have to be able to partner up with others as well. That could be actually super interest or super important. Now, remember, Neptune is going stationary direct on 29 degree. And the 29th degree of any sign is known as an energetic degree or the degree of fate and karma. Often it carries a certain type of an urgency or a climax on that degree. So it's kind of like a completion of a major cycle. I feel that urgency that this is kind of like my last chance. I have to go towards that. So any type of lessons, themes, or unresolved issues associated with Neptune's transit through that Pisces, of course, looking at your own chart as well. It's a kind of like at the final point of resolution. So, for example, it is happening in my first house, right on my progress sun. So this could be an indication. Sun rules the health department in my chart. So this could indicate that this is kind of like my last chance to get my body sorted. It can feel like it. And of course, what does Mars do there? It is motivating. It is nagging Neptune. Let's go towards that vision. What are we yearning? It's a decision-making time. And it can also indicate that I feel like I'm at a crossroads. So the decision made under this influence of fated type of energy will have consequences. That's exactly what the Saturn says to us. The 29 degree is also a crisis degree. It's kind of like a degree where you have to demonstrate everything you have learned in that particular house, and of course in the sign as well. So this is the final reckoning with your illusions, how you have deceived myself, what you are running away from, what type of addictions I've got, what type of spiritual disillusionment I have gone through. And basically, once we've done that, this would talk to us about having to release of all those self-delusions so that you can step fully into this clear-eyed spiritual awareness. And Pisces, like I said, it's about endings, closure, therefore transition as well. Because the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to be happening in the sign of Aries early next year. So the next few months is about clearing, tying up the loose ends, basically. So, this is about the final clarity before you leap. It's about crystallized clarities, basically. It's a fated spiritual awakening. It's about the dissolution of your last attachments. It's about completion and then transition. Now, like I said, Neptune is sitting on the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto, which is actually rarely talked about, because obviously we just kind of like think of the mini grand sextile that is happening. Obviously, once Neptune is back to Aries, it's going to sextile Pluto. Uranus will be back in the sign of Sagittarius, so we're going to have a sextile there too. But Neptune is pretty much sitting on the midpoint of that right now. So a midpoint is basically the halfway through between the planetary distance of two planets. And you can think of it as a collective pressure cooker, actually. Because Uranus-Pluto combination represents certain type of disruptive forces of collective change. It's a cycle around revolution, upheaval, deep-seated transformation. If you think of Uranus, which is sudden rebellion, freedom, breaking away from the past as well. Sometimes with Uranus, things feel a lot more like urgent, for example, but it of course represents technological and intellectual awakening as well. While Pluto is about transformation, the destruction of the old power dynamics, but also your hidden psychological complexes as well. So, how does Neptune fit into the picture? Well, Neptune is going to be spiritualizing this revolution. Imagine Neptune as being the dissolving agent. So Neptune is dissolving and spiritualizing that raw, intense pressure of the Uranus-Pluto kind of energy. So it might show certain type of global upheaval, deep societal changes, which are all guided by collective ideas, spiritual longings, or massive shared delusions as well, of course. It feels like that the revolution is less about purely physical or political power, but more about ideology, the truth, the faith as well. I think, because we have got a vision with Neptune, it feels like that the vision is driving the change, basically. So we feel somehow pressurized to manifest something unified, something more compassionate future. Or will the pressure lead to mass confusion, deception, like cult-like ideologies, or a certain type of escapism as well? Because those are the lower octave of meanings, lower octave meanings of Neptune as well. So I would say that if I bring all the pieces of information together, we've got the initial Mars, Saturn, Neptune square and the Mercury trine Neptune. I think we are gaining certain type of intuitive insights. And they are kind of like a channel to this collective unconscious, which is being purified, being dissolved by these outer planet alignments. And we have got the erratic boundary breaking Mars, which is kind of like a reaction to it. So I'm going to react to it in a massive Sagittarius, unconventional, out of bound ways. So somehow the message here is that your personal spiritual awakening and the drive for action is actually perfectly timed to align, for example, with some of your ideological or karmic transformation. So what I wanted to say with this, that this could be a brilliant time to take action, to make your vision happen, to turn your life around, to bring the most out of these planetary energies. You're gonna have to have a vision. You're gonna have to say goodbye to certain type of visions as well that might not have been serving you. And that would be the Saturn there also. Because let's be frank, we all have got visions, but sometimes they might not be the realistic, or they are not planned out in the bestest possible way. Now, Neptune is it's sitting on the fixed star called Shiat. And Shiat is in the constellation of Pegasus, and it's called the winged horse. And the traditional meaning of Shiat is misfortune or extreme energies. Shiat is often linked to events connected to water, like shipwrecks or floods or being lost at sea, for example. But it is also associated with disgrace, homicide, suicide, misfortune somehow caused by elements, like fire, water, and so forth. So, in the context of this energetic degree, I think it is going to bring up the topic of self-undoing, maybe through certain type of self-pity or despair or the very escapism and delusion, that Neptune's higher purpose is. The higher purpose is that I'm trying to dissolve those. So, we can approach it from the myth of Pegasus as well. Pegasus was a wild, untamed spirit that is eventually harnessed by a hero. I think the hero was called Bellerophon, on top of my head, to achieve something great. But often this is a reckless type of deeds. So this actually speaks to, in my opinion, to that Mars out of bound as well. A need to harness somehow this very unconventional, powerful kind of like Pegasus horse. There is a spirit here that is untamed, and Mars is kind of like feeling the strength that I'm going to be able to tame that kind of like spirit. And maybe we are ready to go really far. So, so I think the problem with Shiat, of course, that our deepest, most confusing illusions and our karmic spiritual debts, are being brought to its final, unavoidable climax. And it comes with a risk of certain type of despair, basically, or self-destructive escapism. And most likely, Uranus and Pluto is bringing that reckoning there, which is not just personal, of course, but it looks like it might be happening, on a bigger scale also. And you can think of Mars and Mercury, because those are personal planets, as the tools. So Mercury trine Neptune is, it's a mental guidance to see the truth. Mars is helping you to cut through these confusions and illusions. And Mars eventually is moving into the sign of Capricorn, so we're going to have a solid plan here. Um, so let me kind of like try to give you some ideas or like scenarios that I can actually imagine on a personal as well as on a global level. I mean, I can imagine a kind of like an ideological conflict, or kind of like, two parties are sitting down and then they have got their own narratives, and then it ends up kind of like as a battle, which might be reaching this climax point as well. Like I said, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto connections are all about radical social change. Now, Mars joining the club, it is actually driven by a belief. And it is very much believed that there is more to it. Like I have to figure out the truth, the spiritual truth, from that mass marketed fantasy or cult-like deception or this political dogma that we are being fed by you know. So this is somehow, it feels like that it's a brutal moment of truth, basically. Of course, this could actually indicate, because Pisces rules oil, chemicals, seas, and because Shiat is linked to water-based disasters, so this could actually a major environmental, like a climate event, like a flood, a major oil spill, or certain type of like sea contamination, for example. And that would be more of a collective wake-up call, that on a global level, we have been neglecting, for example, these important tasks. And this could be awakening, for example, some international bodies or activists as well, you know, because how this could have happened. Or with that Mars out of bound energy, it's kind of like a little bit of a lawless impulse. So this could be a boundary breaking act, to figure out global secrets and illusions. So it's kind of like a little bit of a whistleblower, a journalist, a hacker, for example, with Mars out of bound, takes a huge risk to expose someone, a political vision, for example. But more importantly, on a personal level, like I said, you finally gain this total clarity about a dream, around about a career path or a relationship that has felt maybe nebulous or over romanticized or very confusing. And then you are ready to kind of potentially walk out of it. It's kind of like you wake up one morning and just know that the path you have chased is the one, or it requires an immediate unconventional action. And that illusion potentially must be dropped completely. Maybe imagine that you realize that a person you have idealized for years is actually unavailable. And you start seeing the true, kind of non-glamorous reality of that romance or creative pursuit. And maybe Mars is trying to empower you to break free or to commit to it. And like I said, with the Mercury Neptune trine, it somehow facilitates that deep intuitive dive into a karmic pattern related to potentially victimhood or self-pity. So therefore, it's kind of like receiving a fated insight, potentially through dreams, for example, about my own self-sabotage, like the way I have been running away from something. And guess what? The clarity is painful, but eventually it is leading to this emotional liberation, which is the Uranus and Pluto midpoint, basically. It's kind of like suddenly understanding the root cause of my fear or my addictions, and then you feel highly energized to break the cycle completely. It's about breaking a karmic cycle, pretty much. It could also feel like that you are being called upon to act in a compassionate or unconventional way. It's kind of like you might feel that you need to sacrifice, for example, a comfortable position for a higher idea, or it can feel like that I have to be fighting aggressively for the most like like a cause that I truly believe in. So imagine scenarios where you resign from a high-paying but unfulfilling job just to dedicate your life to a mission of yours, something that you have dreamt about for a very long time. So finally, I would like to give you some type of like questions, maybe that is going to be helping you um, answer your own inquiries about your natal chart. So on one hand, in which area of life have I been avoiding the truth? Obviously, if it's in your seventh house, maybe this is connected to relationships, for example. Or what is that final last standing fantasy or self-pitying story I need to surrender and dissolve right now? Or where am I allowing boundaries to dissolve, either by letting others impose on me or by me imposing on others, of course? Or if I were to apply, harsh dose of reality to one ideal I hold, what would that ideal be? Or who am I idealizing? What vision might not be concrete? Where are my plans built on hope rather than facts? Because Mercury is doing the investigation, right? And then it wants to see the facts very clearly. Or am I chasing a vision of perfection or a feeling of completion that is ultimately unattainable? Or is my vision motivated by genuine calling, or is it kind of like an escape from a difficult reality? Or am I feeling hopeless, or am I a victim of something, or what is threatening me? What is kind of like holding me back or derailing my progress right now? Or have I engaged in any form of self-sabotage or escapism, such as, let's say, with Saturn, which is the planet of procrastination? That could be one topic, for example, that as an answer of yours. And what is the karmic lesson from the last 14 years that I have been forced to integrate right now? Because, like I said, the 29 degree is the sense of urgency. Or like where am I directing my energy? Like towards anger or pointless battles, or I'm just reckless, you know? Or what deep or submerged truth did I learn during the last Mercury trine cycle that now I need to put into action? Um, Or what is that little tiny step that I have to take this week to make my true spiritual vision a tangible reality? So these would be some of the questions that you might want to be kind of like answering or thinking about. And I think, you know, even regardless of your natal chart. But some of these questions are more on the collective level. Of course, looking at if you have got any planets, for example, on 26 to 29 degree of Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, or Virgo, then obviously those planets you would need to be looking at what they rule. Like I told you at the beginning, I've got progress Sun on 29 degree of Pisces. It's going to be shifting very soon. Thank God. I cannot wait. And, Sun rules my sixth house. Also, you want to be reading into where Neptune is natally in your chart. So, for example, natally is in my 10th house. So, how does that connect to my first house? The sixth, the 10th house, how does that relate to my first house? And this is how you can do a bit of a mini reading for yourself. So, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it's helpful. Do the usual stuff, press like, subscribe, share, comment, and so forth. And please consider joining my charity webinar taking place on the 27th of December. And it's all going to be about opposition, some new discoveries, and I'm going to teach you in that couple of hour lesson of how to work with your own oppositions from this new perspective that I have discovered recently. So have a lovely week, everyone, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye bye.